President Trump, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane are all telling you how everything in the world is going great with this whole war in Iran, with the dueling blockades. We are in control. They have no control. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine until you actually look at the only stat that matters: how many ships have passed through the Strait of Hormuz of this so-called Project Freedom. And the answer today is a big goose egg. Now, we're going to try to see if we can, if it's even possible, distinguish between the words that were spoken today and the actual results that are going to fall off this and where this is going. And we have nobody better to do that with than Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who is a former defense and foreign policy analyst. Is a defense and foreign policy analyst, who was a former advisor to the Secretary of Defense, highly decorated combat veteran, and big-time friend of the show. Doug, welcome back as always.
Yep, happy to be here.
Well, look, let's jump right into it. President, just before we came on the air, President Trump was in the Oval Office, and of course, as anytime he opens it up for questions, the Iran war is going to be at the front and center, and that was the case today. Here's what he had to say.
The blockade's been amazing. It's like a piece of steel. Nobody's going to challenge the blockade, and I think it's working out very well. We're going to see. I can say this: Iran wants to make a deal. What I don't like about Iran is they'll talk to me with such great respect, and then they'll go on television, they'll say, we did not speak to the president. We did not. I just spoke to, we did not speak to the president. So they play games, but let me just tell you, they want to make a deal. And who wouldn't? When your military is totally gone, we could do anything we want to them. Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't, Doug? I mean, let's just start there. Who wouldn't want to make a deal with Donald Trump? Can you think of anyone?
I don't know. Washington and Hollywood tend to run on hot air and empty political slogans, but the rest of the world runs on diesel, gasoline, liquefied natural gas, and so forth. The rest of the world is not doing so hot. And in fact, we're not doing so hot here at home. So I think this sort of rhetoric works for a short period of time. Then people disassemble it, discover what's right, what's true, and what isn't, and then they walk away, disappointed. I think that's going to happen more and more and more. If we can do anything we want, well, why haven't we?
And you know what I mean? Let's just take a look at you talk about the words matter. I mean, they work temporarily. Here's how they're working today. You see that the price of gas is a barrel of oil dropped 4% down to 101.3. So everybody's going, oh, well, I guess if it's going that good, I guess we're in good shape. But when you take a look at the other statistic, the one that really does matter, is what's getting through the strait. This is just right before we came on the air here as well. According to the New York Times, nothing has gone through today. The United States and Iran made a compelling claims over which side controlled the Strait of Hormuz, adding pressure to the shaky ceasefire. The U.S. Navy launched an effort to escort vehicles through the vital shipping route, which, by the way, is contended. Did we actually escort vehicles or not? Because there's conflicting information even from the Pentagon. But then the key part, the strait itself remains effectively closed. Only 2 ships were known to have passed through the waterway on Monday, and on Tuesday, traffic appeared at a standstill. So if that's the case, if nothing is changed except for the price of oil, what is that going to tell you about the long-term impacts of this?
Well, we know that the price of crude oil has risen by roughly 82% since the war started. I don't see that coming down anytime soon. In fact, I think it's going to get worse. The other point is, it's interesting to me when the New York Times decides to tell the truth and when they don't. And they decided to tell the truth, which means the CIA must have said, go ahead and publish this and tell the truth. Why? Are they trying to harm President Trump, undermine him, or are they trying to push him into escalation? Because the only thing you can conclude after that particular analysis is that, well, we need to escalate quickly because we're not getting through. We're not achieving our aims, assuming that our aim is to open the strait.
Well, and let's actually get to this morning. There was another press conference with Secretary of War Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Kane, and both of them look at a couple of different things. One is basically the strategic intent of this so-called Operation or Project Freedom, not even an operation. Then the other looked at the operational impacts. I'd like to have you weigh in on both. Let's start with Secretary Hegseth, who said, here's what it's intended to accomplish.
We're not looking for a fight, but Iran also cannot be allowed to block innocent countries and their goods from an international waterway. Iran is the clear aggressor, harassing civilian vessels, threatening mariners from every nation indiscriminately, and weaponizing a critical choke point for its own financial benefit, or at least trying to. For too long, Iran has been harassing ships, shooting at civilian tankers from all nations, and trying to impose a tolling system. Iran's plan, a form of international extortion, is unacceptable.
So it's all about keeping them from doing extortion, and they can't do it. But I mean, let's just start with one of his first premises there, and because he's trying to, again, using words here to paint the Iranians like they're just the aggressors, like there's no reason for them to have shut this down, and we're just trying to set things right. What do you say, Doug?
Well, Israel began the war with its strikes on Iran, and we followed rapidly behind Israel. Ultimately, at Israel's insistence, or it's the insistence of its agents in the United States and the Israel lobby. So we can say pretty conclusively, we are the aggressors. We started the war. Now it sounds like Mr. Hegseth, on orders from President Trump, is sending a new message. Well, we really don't want a war anymore. We really want to just get along. But if you want to get along with us, you have to accept our demands. And most important, you have to open the strait. Well, what are we doing with a blockade? If the strait is closed by the Iranians, why do we need a blockade? It seems like a silly notion. If they've already closed the place, why are you blockading it? Oh, well, we want to keep ships from getting in that might help or assist Iran in some way. Well, that's another aggressive anti-Iranian action. Look, this whole thing defies logic. There is no rationality. There is no strategy. The only strategy we had was, whoa, look, people are rising up in the streets. What we need to do is bomb in support of those rising up against this evil regime. Well, that didn't last long. They did not kill 30,000 people. There were only roughly about 3,400 dead, of which 400 were policemen. And we now know that the Mossad and the CIA were intimately involved in forcing that and provided weapons to the people in the demonstration. So after that failed, we decided decapitation was the answer. We'll kill the regime by killing its leadership. So we did that. That didn't work very well. Iran came rolling back into action and punished us greatly for what we did by destroying our bases in the region. Then we said our bases really weren't destroyed. Now we found out they really are destroyed. Then we said that nothing had been damaged and we were going to protect our allies in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, and we can't protect our allies. There's nothing we can do to prevent them from being effectively struck by missiles and unmanned systems. Then suddenly we said, well, what we really want at the end of the day, in addition to no enriched uranium and no more, or at least a fraction of the ballistic missiles that Iran has, and no more cooperation with its friends and allies in the region, we now want the strait open. And that's really important. And we're acting on behalf of the whole world. We're trying to create a dome over the Strait of Hormuz that will stop Iranians from launching missiles or unmanned systems against any ships that go through there, because it's those darn Iranians that are causing this. This is all nonsense. There was no problem with the Strait of Hormuz until we started the war. And inevitably, it was not Iran, but Lloyd's of London that shut down the strait. And right now, it's very difficult to get insurance for any of those tankers. And most of the insurance is being provided by the nation states themselves, insuring these vessels. Otherwise, frankly speaking, they couldn't move. But in the meantime, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Indians, Chinese have all made separate arrangements with Iran to move tankers out of the Gulf. So who's keeping them in there? What's really happening? What is this blockade all about? I think Last week I think I said that President Trump was deciding not to decide. This week, I think he decided on a blockade until he decides. So that's where we are. And eventually, what is he going to decide? Well, he only has two choices. One is suspend all operations, say, gosh, guess we were wrong. Military power won't work. We're going to have to find a different way forward. And until then, we're disengaging so the rest of the world can get on with the business it needs, and it needs energy. Choice number two is we go back to trying to destroy the Iranian state. Which one? Where are we headed? And listening to Secretary of War Hegseth, I'm not really sure which one we're headed for. I think we're going to escalate, but I think he's leaving it ambiguous, don't you?
I do, yeah, and because I think it's important, when. I mean, as of 8 a.m. this morning, that's where they were. But by now, it's it's noon right now, so it's 4 hours later, so it could be completely different. And this stuff, you just talked about how it's been ping-ponging back and forth. So who knows where it's going to end up. But there's a couple other things I want to point out here from this morning's press conference. General Kane, if Hegseth was kind of talking about a quasi what this was supposed to accomplish, General Kane talked a little bit about how it's supposed to be accomplished.
Project Freedom is designed to protect commercial shipping and help restore the flow of commerce through the strait and sustain freedom of navigation. CENTCOM has established an enhanced security area on the southern side of the strait that is now protected by U.S. land, naval, and air assets to help defeat further Iranian aggression against commercial shipping. I'd like to share a little bit more about U.S. capabilities, but for operational security purposes, I'm not going to get into specific details out there. On the surface, guided missile destroyers and other warships are detecting and defeating Iranian threats. This includes fast boats and one-way attack drones. In the air, more than 100 fighters, attack aircraft, and other manned and unmanned aircraft synchronized by the 82nd Airborne Division are in the air 24 hours a day, providing defensive overwatch for the enhanced security area and its approaches that I discussed.
Now, one thing he didn't say there, Doug, is that there's no actual escorting of any ships. He didn't mention anything about that. The only thing that the Navy was supposed to do is identify and then interdict any kind of movement. Of course, that would also be by the aircraft that he mentioned, and as well as the fighter jets over the top there. But how is that supposed to work in terms of, you mentioned a second ago, it's really Lloyd's of London that is keeping this closed. How is that going to encourage these ships to say, sure, let's run this thing and just count on you keeping us safe?
Well, I sort of come away from this with three observations, and everybody can come away with whatever they want at this point, because the whole thing seems ambiguous and unclear to me. First of all, I was waiting for him at the end of his statement to say, now look, I didn't write this. This was handed to me and I was told to say it. Don't ask me any questions, because it didn't make any sense. First of all, what is the 82nd Airborne Division headquarters doing? He says they're synchronizing. Well, the last time I looked, in an operation like this, it would be the Combined Air Operations Center that would be handling all of this, deconflicting all of the flights, making sure that the various aircraft, manned and unmanned, don't collide, keeping an eye on the strait, every inch of it at all times, and integrating that with the Navy picture, which we can do. I'm not sure what that means. And again, why is the division headquarters from the 82nd doing any of it? It's very strange. And then lastly, I think we have this illusion now that we're going to have this invisible barrier provided by all the assets that were outlined that are going to prevent the Iranians from interfering with any ships that go through. Well, good luck with that, because I don't think that's going to work unless we've found a way to relate light, gravity, and magnetism and break the laws of physics and put up, what's the right word, laser beams or directed energy walls or something. That's not going to work. You're not going to be able to influence that. The Iranians are not using major combat vehicles. They're using unmanned vessels and some small fast boats. But most important, they can still strike everything, and we can't stop it. We cannot defend what goes through that strait. So the whole thing strikes me as movie magic or imaginary nonsense. It doesn't sound real in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it was one thing that I was curious. Unfortunately, because you may remember last year they booted out all the real media from these Pentagon press reviews, and now they only have the hand-selected ones that signed a document to do what they're told, or they can't come in there. So no one asks any of the hard questions, like we had allegedly two American flag tankers that came out yesterday, but there were two other tankers, one of which was a South Korean, and I don't remember the nationality of the second one, that were attacked by Iran, which put the brakes on. Nobody else made any attempt in it. And so if there were two ships attacked, then by definition, all of this, what he called, by the way, red, white, and blue shield. They have the Iron Dome, they have the Golden Dome, and now they have the red, white, and blue shield, he says. And yet on day one, hour one, two got through, two didn't. So how effective is that actually going to be?
Well, one wonders why those first two were allowed through. I don't know how they got through. Nobody does. I don't think the Iranians have explained it. And I don't know that the U.S. has explained it. Who knows? We now know that nothing else is coming out. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't know how we rectify that. I think we have to ask the question, why are we creating this illusion? Is this to enable the president to say, the strait is now open, we've proven this, there's no longer any requirement for us to be engaged here, and we're leaving? Is this his declare victory and leave moment? I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to be fooled. How many ships went through on a daily basis until the war began? Well, we know that. We're not even close to it. We're not going to get close to it. How many barrels of oil came out of the strait every day? 13 to 15 million barrels a day? We're not even close to that. And then we have the problem inside the Gulf of oil production itself. I think what everybody is learning is a very hard lesson, Dan. Remember, we used to hear everybody talk about just-in-time logistics. I think that's going to change now. We're talking about just-in-case logistics, where boardrooms become war rooms, and everybody is going to stockpile everything from oil to rare earths, preferably refined rare earths, and all forms of liquefied natural gas and other things, uranium. We go down the list, phosphates, aluminum, so forth. I think everybody is going to start down this road of just-in-case logistics, because if you don't, you have no control over the destiny of your own country, because the countries all run on the same thing. It's called energy. And for energy to be efficient and effective and keep your society healthy, it has to be cheap. It was cheap. We've now made it prohibitively expensive. And watching the price of oil in a given day fall back is a reflection of people on Wall Street that are out of touch with reality. They don't understand military operations, and they believe whatever the president says. That's the only way to explain it. And a lot of people in Wall Street think, well, eventually the Navy, the Marines, they'll just take the strait. They don't even understand it geographically. They don't understand the military challenge that exists. So when these things begin to sink in, you'll also have the pain here in the United States increase, because our stocks are way below what is required to make this country run effectively.
Yeah, Gary, if you can pull that graphic up that Doug was referring to there. This chart here shows a range of gasoline stocks in the United States and how they performed over time. And that gray area there is the range. It's what it was at its lowest and what it was at its highest at any given year. And you see that the trend here is going down. It's now already at the bottom of what it has ever been at this date, and the strait is still closed. So what does that tell you about what we can expect this summer?
Well, look at this is in thousands of barrels. You read up there, weekly ending stocks of total gasoline. So we're down at 2026 right now to 220,000 this just before you go into the summer when people drive more than they drive through most of the year. This is not going to get any better. It's going to fall below that. It's going to take a long time to recover from this. And we know that California in particular is very, very vulnerable. They're dependent on foreign oil imports. We don't have pipelines that run from the East Coast to the West Coast to ensure that we can provide gasoline inside the United States to places like California. We don't have it. The bottom line is everything is going to get worse. Prices are going to rise. Inflation is going to increase. And pretty soon we're going to have shortages in food as well as the energy. And remember, the economy runs on cheap energy and cheap credit. If energy isn't cheap, credit's not cheap because yields go up. When bond yields go up, you've got a problem. We can't afford them. That's where we're headed. I don't know what the magic number is. I've long thought that 5% on the 10-year bond yield was probably the ceiling that would collapse the whole system. We'll see. I'm surprised we're not already there, but we'll get there. And in the meantime, keep in mind, the rest of the world is de-dollarizing. They're dumping dollars. China is dumping dollars. Japan now is in a currency crisis. It's trying to defend the yen. Pretty soon to do that, they're going to have to sell off our treasuries. The world then is going to go in what direction? To the yuan. That's where business is going to be done. Now, we can scream and holler and protest. We can threaten and cajole, but that's where we're headed. And suddenly China is going to become a safe haven for wealth, which is something that I didn't expect to see in my lifetime.
Yeah, nobody did, and nor should it have. We should have remained this stalwart, safe place, except for incredibly foolish policies like this war of choice, which is now just shredding all of that. I want to look at well, actually, before I did, since you brought up China, even before I go to the next section here, would like your view on something that happened recently, and I think this is maybe related both to China's continuing to rise in the eyes of the world, as well as this potential de-dollarization move, in that Scott Bessent said, hey, you know what? I'm going to put more, Operation Economic Fury on Iran. So I'm going to sanction more people, and that included some Chinese. Anybody who buys anything that does get out through the blockade, we're going to put some sanctions on them. And China says, yeah, no, you're not. These 5 Chinese companies, they said, no, we're going to back that up, so that's not going to happen. I'm not aware that the Chinese, who have historically been kind of risk averse and have been unwilling to directly contradict things, was pretty direct in that. What do you make of that?
Well, it's not just China's resistance to what we're trying to do to them and to the business partners they have around the world. You've also got the port, and I'm not sure about the pronunciation. It's on the Pakistani coast that lies on the Indian Ocean, called Gwandar or Gwandahar. And this port was built literally at the cost of several billion dollars by China. And this port is top of the line in terms of its modernization and its capability. That port is outside of the Persian Gulf, and it's roughly 54 to 55 miles from the border with Iran. Trucks can move anything that comes into that port in Pakistan along that road straight into Iran. And that's what's happening. And at the same time, trucks can also come out of Iran, go down that particular road into that port. Have you got it on a map somewhere?
Yeah, it's right there. This is it.
Okay.
Right, this is what you're talking about.
And I'm not sure about the pronunciation, so I apologize to people who know more about this than I do. Guanbarat or Guanbar? I can't quite see. But
yeah, we're rot. I think Gurahat. Something, yeah. I can't get it right either, but that's it.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, you see how close it is to the Iranian border.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to do business through that port and along that road. Now, the question that will come up undoubtedly is the United States Navy going to now blockade that port, which is a Pakistani port, or are we going to actually attack that lifeline that is being built from that port up into Iran? I would say those are very dangerous things to do, because that could bring you into direct military confrontation with China. But the bottom line is that China is not abandoning Iran. China is going to continue to provide Iran whatever it can. And that's not simply because Iran is an important business partner in terms of the resources, particularly oil and gas and so forth, that it exports to China. But I think the view in Beijing, and increasingly the view in Moscow, is that if you don't stand up to the United States at this point and you don't back the people who are resisting them, the United States are going to turn on others, and eventually the United States is going to turn on you. So I see no end to this that is going to be profitable or advantageous for us. But we know the president and the way he thinks, and I don't see him willingly disengaging from this unless he can call it, quote unquote, a win.
Well, and let me show you what he is calling it, because he's saying it's actually, you know, it's more of a mini war.
We have a war right now, and we're into like, what, 6 weeks? They said, what's taking so long? We were in Vietnam 19 years. We're in Iraq for many years, 10 years, 12 years. Our country's booming now, despite the fact that we're in I call it a mini war, because that's all they are. They don't have a Navy anymore. Think of it. They had 159 ships. How many do they have left, Kelly? Out of 159, take a guess. She's very smart. 0.
Yeah, she's very smart. Whoever that person is, they can count. But one other thing we can also count is that during the Vietnam War, during the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, the global supply of energy was never cut off. Now then we're at whatever it is, just past 60 days. And you just showed that, talked about that chart with gasoline. And of course, we can talk about fertilizers, helium, aluminum, just global energy across the board. And those things are all stacking up now. And it concerns me when his thought process is, oh, we can go a lot longer, thinking that those other wars went years, so we can too. That reminded me of something I saw earlier today in The Economist. This is one of the Economist authors here. He writes that in several recent conversations with aide, Trump expressed frustration that the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, while effective in crushing Iran's economy, hasn't forced Tehran to meet his nuclear demands. Basically, the story of the whole war. People convinced Trump that a particular military action will drive rapid political change in Iran. The military action predictably fails to do so. Trump gets frustrated, rinse and repeat. And if this is a guy who's frustrated and he wants an action right now and he doesn't want to wait, what does that tell you about where this can go? Because as you said, a week ago when you were on the show, we were kind of in this wait period. Now we did this blockade, and where are we now?
Well, we're nowhere. That's the bottom line. He doesn't seem to understand that you can print money, but you can't print energy or materials. You can't print minerals. In other words, you can't conjure up these things out of nothing. We're conjuring up wealth out of nothing. We just print money. And he thinks that that's the same thing that he's dealing with right now. It won't work. It's dangerous, and that's going to crash us at some point. The other thing I think that we have to keep in mind is that if you're President Trump right now, you're trying to convince everybody on Wall Street, as well as everybody who's willing to listen to you anymore, that this is a mini war. No, this is not a big war. This is a small war. In other words, don't worry about it. We've got it under control. We'll manage it. There's nothing really that the Iranians can do anymore. This will end when we decide to end it. In the meantime, by all means, continue to trade your stocks and bonds. Don't be concerned about this. This is not a major event. Well, Dan, that's nonsense, as you and I both know. What Iran has proven is that they can be very effective, and they don't really need a Navy per se or an Air Force. They've got the ability with terrestrial-based and space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to see persistently everything that happens in the Gulf region and around their country. And they can target instantaneously with data that comes from satellites right down to the weapon system. And that is deciding the outcome. And the place is too big to invade. You know, we don't have 1 million men standing around waiting to be shipped out to go somewhere and do anything. So the whole business is a fraud. And what he's trying to do is convince everybody it's not. None of this is going to work. And again, you can't print the diesel that moves your trucks. You can't print the fertilizer that grows your crops. You can't print the natural gas that powers your factories. So America had better wake up. We better find a way around this or out of it, because our business strategies cannot easily account for physical scarcity of food, feed, fuel, and fertilizer caused by these shipping closures. You know, this is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe on a global level. It hasn't hit us dramatically yet, but you and I know over the next 60 days, it's going to be hell to pay here inside the United States.
And that's
Shut down the food stamps. See what the hell happens. All hell will break loose in this country.
Indeed. In fact,
we don't call them food stamps anymore. What do we call them now? We gave them a new name. I don't remember.
Yeah, same concept. Yeah, I can't think of it. But that's what we had. Chris Martinson was on our show a couple of days ago from Peak Prosperity, and he was complaining that when Trump does these kinds of things, and when he reassures the markets and causes the price to go down, especially of oil, he considers that a really bad thing, because that gives false signals to the American public that everything's going to be fine. Don't cut back anything. Don't conserve anything. Just keep on spending like you have been. Keep on driving like you have been. But then we're chewing down our strategic petroleum reserve. The only way we can keep doing this is by getting rid of our stored up fuel. But then the problem is going to come in, as you just talked about, that once you run out of that excess and the strait is still closed, now then you don't have any more of that. So now there's a physical shortfall. And then that's when the price, he predicts, is just going to shoot north.
Well, Americans aren't aware of it, but 70% of our farmers have already said they can't even afford to buy fertilizer anymore. That's how high the price of fertilizer has risen. Now, the president was warned about this, believe it or not, back in March. And what happened? He ignored it. President Trump has a habit of ignoring things that don't conform to his expectation. And I think that's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to make everyone feel good. And he's going to continue to do this until he can't. And it's not going to last very long.
Now, let's take a look at what the other side of this equation is thinking, because that can give us a clue to where we're heading. And this is from Ghalibaf on his X account. Really important, I think, here. He said the new equation, the Strait of Hormuz, is in the process of being solidified. So they have no intent, and every person that I've either read or talked to on the Iranian side says that it's not even up for negotiation or debate. They will retain control of the strait, which he seems to imply here. The security of shipping and energy transit has been jeopardized by the United States and its allies, so he's certainly blaming us for, of course, we started the war through the violation of the ceasefire and the imposition of a blockade. Of course, their evil will diminish. Then he says the important thing here, we know full well that the continuation of the status quo is intolerable for America while we have not yet even begun. And I think what he's saying there, which is something Professor Morandi has said and several others, that the Iranian side can suffer a lot more than we can and a lot longer than we can, because they don't have the issue of fertilizers and all the stuff being shut off like we do. Most of the stuff, he said, they have like 90% domestic food and everything else that they have right there in their country. So they can endure the currency being devalued, the loss of imports. They suffer because of medicines not getting in and other kinds of things. But they think they can suffer longer than we can. Is he right or is he wrong?
No, I think he's right, but there's something else that nobody bothers to bring up, Dan. When has President Trump gone to the American people and articulated in detail what's at stake for us in this war? When has he talked to the American people and said, we are going to war on behalf of Israel? We're doing it for the following strategic reasons that are valid, that make a difference to our lives. And we are attacking to destroy Iran because Iran's destruction will strategically benefit the United States in some way. He's never made the case, because there is no case to be made for those things. Those things are ridiculous. You know, when FDR did many things, and I didn't agree with it. I wasn't there, but I wouldn't have agreed with much of what he did. But on the other hand, he was very good at going to the American people and making the case. Even Lyndon Johnson made a stab at it. He wasn't very good at it, but he made a stab at it. Certainly President Nixon found it necessary, and he did it, and that's one of the reasons he was reelected in a landslide. what's this president doing? He's not doing his job as president, leading this country. That's the biggest issue right now. You know, making ridiculous statements in the Oval Office about reducing the people that you don't like to ruins or rubble. Those kinds of wild statements may, appeal to a few people in your base who like filthy language or, boasts and bloviation, but it doesn't do you any good. And again, where is the strategy? What is the strategic framework? How does this fit in with the larger strategic interests of the United States and its friends? And our friends, by the way, in Asia are the people who are being hurt badly by all of this. I predict that before this is over, the Koreans and the Japanese will be inviting us to pack our things and get out of their countries, just as the Germans now are effectively saying the same thing.
Yeah, and then of course Trump is talking about getting out of the of 5,000 or so out of Germany, maybe out of Spain, and I think Italy too. He's just tossing these things around. I doubt he gives any thought to any of this stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's been landing on open ears on the other side, maybe moving them down the path of asking us to do so.
Well, you and I know from experience that leaving Europe, frankly, is long overdue. We should have gotten out of these places a long time ago. Our presence there has been somewhere between a crutch for many of these countries and their economies, and frankly, a burden. You know, how much of each it is depends on where you are. But the point is, it's unnatural. It doesn't have to happen anymore. There's no strategic justification for it. But if you're going to do this, instead of making nasty statements and justifying your actions on the basis of an insult, why not come up with a plan? And why not sit down with all of these allies and say, look, it's time for us to go. You know that, we know that. So let's see, how do we do this? How long will this last? Can we do this in 24 months, 36 months, 96 months? Let's sit down and figure it out. That hasn't happened. That's because there is no strategic framework.
Yeah.
And everybody keeps saying, what do you think the president's doing? And then you have these poor, pathetic souls sitting on the sidelines like, it's part of a plan. It's a plan. We're harming China. China is the big loser here. Really? I don't think so. I think a lot of people are losing, but China's not one of them, and certainly not Russia. Russia's, profiting from a cash bonanza. The only thing in Russia that the Russians want to know is why the hell Putin isn't ending this war once and for all. They're all sick of it. They want him to crash all the way to the Dnieper River, cross it, take Odessa, seize Kharkiv, march on Kiev, and get it over with. He really ought to. It makes sense for him to do that. He's not going to have a partner in the United States. We're not going to help. The Europeans are sick of it. Their governments are teetering on the edge of disaster. They're going to fall. So Russia should take advantage of this. But they're not thus far. They're sitting around waiting to see what happens next. Big mistake. And these little incremental moves of 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers. Come on, that's not how you win a war. You may win a battle that way, but you're not going to win the war. So it's really strange right now. But the notion that somehow or another we're coming out of this smelling like a rose must mean that no one has a sense of smell, because the whole thing
Right.
stinks to me.
Yeah, it's a very different smell.
What we're shoveling,
Right. Yeah. I think that's what some being confusion is. Now, so all the stuff that we've talked about so far has been over the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, this is an interesting map here. This shows in the green on the bottom. This is what General Kane talked about. This is the path that he wants. We want to protect people moving through. The one in the red is kind of in the center. That used to be the path, but it's apparently mined right now, so nobody's using that one. And then in the blue one in the up, that's the approved path for the Iranian side. So you have dueling blockades, and you also have dueling safe zones for people to get out. But right now, nobody's getting out on anything. So that just shows you some of the weirdness of it and some of the nonsense. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, though, all this is about the strait and whether we get the blockades unblocked. But what if we don't? What if we get back to more conflict? One of the things that was asked of at the press conference this morning was, has the ceasefire ended because of these attacks? And General Kane said, well, we've been attacked 10 times our ships, but it's been kind of low level. None of them have succeeded. So stays below the threshold. That's a political decision anyway. So no, the ceasefire is still in effect. But when you look at some others, folks, let's go back to Ghalibaf. This is from an Iranian account. This is through DropSite, where they have said, hey, this is what Ghalibaf is saying. He says the necessity for keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed and preventing U.S. destroyers from passing through it has made conflict between Iran and the United States inevitable. The main confrontation will be carried out with the Israeli regime. And that's interesting because you've had, let me see, I think I got this one still handy here. You've had General Keith Kellogg, who kind of says the same thing. And he's like, look, we should arm the Iranian people to rise up, but we should take Karg Island. We should just quit dithering around. He's been saying this for a long time now. Do you think that the war is inevitable, or do you think that we're going to end up getting off without having to go back to the war?
Well, I mean, that's where we really started the conversation. But I think the speaker in Iran hit on something very, very important that we're not paying enough attention to. What is the rationale for this conflict? It's ultimately Israel. The Israelis want Iran to be destroyed. Again, they view Iran as the last man standing, although they are now increasingly sensitive to the power and the influence of the Turks. And I think their other eye is also in Egypt, because with Turkish support, the Egyptians could pose a real threat. So I think we're losing sight of what this is all about. It all started with Gaza. Remember the 7 October attack, which is largely being discredited now. It's widely understood, even in Israel, this was allowed to happen, right?
That's certainly what a lot of the evidence says, yeah.
Yeah. So the problem we have now is we allowed it to happen. The Israelis struck back, and then they essentially demonstrated this was their trigger for a plan they already had on the shelf. This is the plan called Project Greater Israel. So Project Freedom has nothing to do with the Strait. It's all about the Project for Greater Israel. Well, that's falling apart in a number of different ways. We could talk about that on another occasion, but I think Ambassador Freeman was on recently and talked in greater detail about how that's collapsing. It hasn't worked in Lebanon. It's not going to work in Jordan. It's not going to work in Syria. And in the meantime, the countries, the two big players, Egypt and Turkey, are acutely aware of what the Israelis are about. And they're on the edge right now of intervention. That's what people don't understand. The entire world is aligning against Israel. And because we are unconditionally supporting them, the world is largely aligning against us. And this is going to get worse unless by some miracle, President Trump realizes all of the dangers that we talked about during this session economically and where we're headed. And if he understands that, he'd end this immediately and get out. And I'm not sure he really understands it, not based on those remarks that you just rebroadcast on your program.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be puzzling, because that's supposed to be his one area of actual expertise about the economics and the business aspects, and yet somehow that seems to be missing. But then we're still left with what next? And actually, let me zero in on this Israeli situation, because we've I think in the last show we talked about, when we were talking about the first effects of the first 40 days of this war when it was active, and there was allegedly somewhere around 14,000 targets that we had serviced, et cetera. And that had brought us really low on interceptors, whether it's THAAD or PAC-3, on our offensive, whether it was JASSM or the Tomahawk cruise missiles. And if we go back into another active phase of fighting, I mean, we're going to dwindle down into into the red or black in terms of the stockpiles. We just can't keep going on. Israel is embarked on a path, especially now in Lebanon, just adding to the rest of them. There's no easy path to military success here, and they can't even maintain that unless we keep shoveling out more cash and more bombs and munitions to allow them to keep going on that. Do you think we'll be able to continue giving Israel that so that they can even try to do these things?
Well, what you're saying is which happens first? Do we collapse financially here at home first? Or do we essentially recognize the futility of our military operations overseas first? I don't have an answer to that. I have this terrible sinking feeling it's going to happen simultaneously. We're going to have an example of this coming up shortly. We're going to wake up. I don't know if it'll be in June or July or maybe earlier. We're going to wake up and discover that the stock market has lost 40, 50, 60% of its value. And anybody you want to pick will talk about this, whether it's Luke Groman or Ray Dalio, any number of people that have looked at this carefully and they know it's coming. So that could happen anytime. And at the same time, you're right. Most of these exotic munitions, these precision guided weapons and missiles, they're going to be exhausted in the space of anywhere from 5 days to 10 days, unless you start ratcheting back or reducing your operational tempo. So you want a clear answer which is going to happen first? I don't know, but they're both going to happen, I think, because I still don't see how President Trump does not escalate at this point, because the alternative for him is humiliation.
Well, that's kind of the last question I wanted to ask here, because if last week you said Trump was just going to wait and figure it out mode, and then he figured out, okay, well, we'll do this blockade, and now we'll do this Project Freedom. Well, that's clearly no more than that's paper deep, because it hasn't resulted in anything so far, despite the claims of success there. So the question is, where are we going to be next week when you come back on the show? Because you just can't sit on this. He successfully, I checked again just a second ago, and the price of oil has continued to drop. So he's had a significant effect on the market today. But there's still 12 million barrels that didn't come out of the Middle East today again. And those stocks in the U.S. keep dwindling down. And so he can't just do this out. I've heard some experts suggest maybe 3 weeks is about all that we can keep the fiction going. And then the actual price of a barrel of oil and the paper price are going to start coming back into alignment. And that's going to be going higher. So where can Trump go? Because then here's the problem, Doug. I mean, and in his business mind still, if he sees this is a problem here and it's not working, then to give in to these guys and say, let's go back and hit them one more time can only exacerbate it, because now then you're going to lose in oil infrastructure, which is just going to bake in long-term problems and probably a depression. How does he navigate that?
Well, you're talking about the physical reality versus the paper reality. And I think he prefers the paper reality. He prefers to think it will be managed, and that he can come out and make statements and persuade people of something that is not true, that it really is true. He's done that several times. And the market, as you point out, initially it responds, things get better, but then over time, what occurs? The prices start to inch up again. The sense of crisis becomes real. It's going to become more real in the future if he presses ahead, and I think he will. The other thing is this blockade is really kind of interesting, because he's imposing the blockade and then he's blaming it all on Iran. But Iran could always make the argument, if you stop blockading us and allow us to utilize the strait and get back to business, everything will be fine. So if you're sitting in Japan or Vietnam or Thailand or Indonesia or somewhere in Europe, whom do you believe? Do you believe Trump, who's blockading it and essentially constipating an already disrupted system? Or do you believe the Iranians, who say, well, if they'll stop the blockade, we'll let everybody go? I don't know. I rather suspect Iran has the advantage in that discussion.
Well, based on performance, I would certainly say so, especially our performance over the last, I don't know, since 2018, especially. Listen, in the last few minutes we have here, Doug, I wonder if you can just kind of give us, what is your best interpretation or explanation, if there is such a thing, on Trump's continued focus on what's next, which is Cuba? He actually said over the past weekend that, that's coming in next, and we're going to move militarily on Cuba. I cannot come up with anything. There's no oil there. There's definitely no security threat. There's no nuclear weapons program or nuclear power program. There's none of those kinds of things. Literally, what in the hell is going on with him in Cuba?
I don't know. Perhaps he's nostalgic for the imperial past. You know, after the Spanish-American War, we made two huge mistakes. One mistake was we stayed in the Philippines when there was no real reason for us to do so. The only thing we wanted to do was establish a coaling station in those days, a place where our ships could come in and reprovision. We ended up instead replacing the Spaniards as the imperial power. We ended up fighting a civil war there that lasted for years, killed 250,000 Filipinos pointlessly, at least that many.
Yeah.
And we annexed Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico, you know, costs us billions and billions of dollars every year. We don't profit from it. They're not growing anything down there that makes money. They don't have any mineral wealth. Now, we stayed there presumably because, again, this would be useful to the Navy. And then for a while, we had a firing range down there. Puerto Rico should be given its independence. It's not part of our country. We'll let it go, get out of it. This is another legacy of 19th century thinking and imperialism. I still think that the best trade we could possibly have made is to offer Denmark Puerto Rico in exchange for Greenland. You know, we'll take Greenland. You can have Puerto Rico. I think the Danes would love it. The Danes love that nice weather down there. Next thing you know, it would be the super destination for everybody in Scandinavia and Northern Europe every year. We haven't been able to do that, but they probably could. You know, bottom line, this is all silly nonsense. We shouldn't be meddling in anybody else's country anymore. There's no reason to do it. People have the right to govern themselves however they like, provided they're not trying to kill us. And if they're not trying to kill us, what difference does it make to us how they govern themselves? But
Indeed.
That's very different from, you know, I'm the greatest, we're the best, and everybody has to do what we say, which I guess is Trumpism, right?
Yeah, well, that's a dying animal, and I think it's going to take a lot of us down with it. But listen, we really appreciate you coming in today and give us some clarification on all this stuff. Always our great pleasure to have you on here. And just to send people to MacGregorWarrior.substack.com to keep up with Doug all during the week until we can see him back here again and find out what in the world is going on with our war next week. I'm eager to find out.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dan. I appreciate it. And I think a lot of people will enjoy the most recent one that I wrote called America's Generals Need NFL Standards. You know,
I'm very intrigued by the title myself. So
you know, if you fail with the Dallas Cowboys, you'll have the entire population of Texas at your throat. But you go overseas and you botch Afghanistan, botch Iraq, botch anything else, everybody in Texas isn't interested. They'll just go ahead and pop another Michelob or something. The problem is we need NFL standards and we need a similar mentality. We want people who are successful. So anyhow, I think a lot of people have read it, liked it. I think anybody who goes on there will enjoy it.
I'm sure they will, and we send people there and hope that they'll see it. Thanks very much, Doug, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Right.
Thanks.
And
we will just see you here in about 5 minutes. Actually, we got the ever popular Larry the Shirt Johnson at 1 p.m. That's just 5 minutes from now. And he's got his own take on what's going on inside the United States and where this thing could be headed. 5 minutes from now, Larry Johnson. And then later this afternoon, we're going to have Mike Adams of that you may have seen. He's actually got a podcast out, and it's called the Health Ranger. And he's going to be talking to us about something that nobody's talking about much, and everybody should be, about the potential for a famine coming as a result of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Tune in today at 4 p.m. on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. See you then. You know, I don't try to talk you into buying gold or tell you how to run your stock portfolio, but there is a way you can help us. Subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with somebody you love.